There is a place where the Thames narrows as it flows through the oldest part of London, where the water darkens beneath stone walls that have stood for nearly 1,000 years. On a winter morning, when fog rolls off the river and the city falls quiet, you can stand on Tower Bridge and look west toward a fortress that has witnessed more bloodshed, more betrayal, and more state-sanctioned murder than any building in British history. Every year, on the night before Remembrance Sunday, the tower holds a ceremony called the Ceremony of the Keys. At exactly 9:53 p.m, the chief yeoman warder locks the outer gates of the fortress in a ritual that has been performed without interruption for over 700 years. It continued during the Blitz, when German bombs fell on the tower and destroyed several buildings. It continued during both World Wars. It continued during the Great Plague of 1665, when bodies were stacked in carts outside the walls. 700 years of locking the same gates, speaking the same words, at the same time every night. It is the oldest military ceremony in the world, and it exists because this place was never just a castle. It was the heart of English power, and power must be guarded. The Tower of London. It does not look like a castle in the way most people imagine castles. There are no soaring turrets or romantic battlements. What you see instead is a complex of 21 towers connected by curtain walls, surrounded by a dry moat, and dominated at its centre by a stark white keep known as the White Tower. It was built to intimidate. It was built to control. And for over 900 years, it has served as a fortress, a royal palace, a prison, an execution ground, a mint, a zoo, an armory, and the most feared address in England. The blood that has been spilled inside these walls could fill the moat twice over. Kings and queens have been murdered here. Children have vanished here. Prisoners have been tortured until they confess to crimes they did not commit, then dragged to a scaffold and beheaded while crowds watched. The tower has been home to acts of cruelty so systematic and so deliberate that even by the standards of medieval and Tudor England, they stand out as exceptional. This is not simply a dark story. This is the darkest story of them all, the story of Britain's most bloodstained castle. It begins in 1066, in the weeks after the Battle of Hastings. William the Conqueror had defeated Harold Godwinson and claimed the English throne. But claiming it and holding it were different challenges entirely. London was the largest city in England, a sprawling Anglo-Saxon settlement of roughly 15,000 people who had no loyalty to this Norman invader. William needed a way to control them, not just to defeat them militarily, but to terrify them into submission. He chose a site at the southeastern corner of the old Roman city walls, where the Thames provided a natural defensive barrier on one side and the ancient stone fortifications protected two others. Construction of the White Tower began in 1078 under the direction of Gundulf, Bishop of Rochester. The building materials were shipped from Caen in Normandy. Norman stone for a Norman fortress in a conquered English city. The symbolism was intentional. Everything about the tower was designed to remind the English population that they were now subjects of a foreign power. The White Tower rose to a height of 90 feet. Its walls were 15 feet thick at the base. It contained a chapel, a great hall, residential chambers for the king, and beneath all of this, a basement that would soon acquire a reputation that would last for centuries. From the moment it was completed, sometime around 1100, the tower served a dual purpose. Above ground, it was a royal residence of considerable luxury. Below ground, it was a prison. The first notable prisoner was Ranulph Flambard, Bishop of Durham, who was imprisoned in 1100 for corruption under King Henry I. Flambard holds the distinction of being the first recorded prisoner in the tower and also the first to escape, reportedly climbing down from a window using a rope smuggled to him inside a barrel of wine. His escape was treated with a certain amount of amusement by chroniclers of the time. The prisoners who followed him would not be so fortunate. Over the next 2 centuries, the tower expanded from a single keep into the fortress complex that exists today. Henry III built the inner curtain wall and added several towers between 1216 and 1272. Edward I completed the outer curtain wall and dug the moat between 1275 and 1285, creating the concentric defensive system that made the tower virtually impregnable. He also established the tradition of housing the crown jewels within the fortress and expanded the royal menagerie, which at various times contained lions, an elephant, a polar bear, and 3 leopards given as diplomatic gifts. But it was under Edward I that the tower acquired its most enduring function. He used it systematically as a prison for political enemies, prisoners of war, and anyone who challenged his authority. The practice of imprisoning opponents in the tower, rather than simply executing them, served a strategic purpose. A prisoner in the tower could be held indefinitely without trial, used as a bargaining chip in negotiations, or produced when convenient to legitimize a political settlement. The tower became an instrument of royal power, more subtle and more effective than any army. The first truly infamous chapter in the tower's bloody history began in 1483, and it involves two children whose fate remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in English history. Edward IV died on April 9th, 1483, leaving the throne to his 12-year-old son, Edward V. The boy's uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, was appointed Lord Protector. Richard escorted young Edward to the Tower of London, ostensibly to prepare him for his coronation. Edward's younger brother, 9-year-old Richard, Duke of York, joined him shortly afterward. The boys were seen playing in the Tower Gardens in the summer of 1483. Then they were seen in windows overlooking the grounds. Then they were seen less frequently. Then they were not seen at all. On June 25th, 1483, Parliament declared both boys illegitimate. Richard of Gloucester was crowned Richard III the following day. The princes in the Tower, as they came to be known, simply disappeared. No announcement was made, no funeral was held, no explanation was ever given. In 1674, workmen repairing a staircase in the White Tower discovered a wooden chest buried beneath the foundation stones. Inside were the skeletal remains of two children. Charles II ordered the bones placed in an urn and interred in Westminster Abbey, where they remain today. A forensic examination conducted in 1933 concluded that the bones belonged to two children aged approximately 10 and 13, consistent with the ages of the princes at the time of their disappearance. The disappearance of the princes is not just a historical mystery, it is a case study in how power operates when there are no constraints. Richard of Gloucester had the legal authority to imprison the boys. He had the political motivation to eliminate them. He controlled the fortress where they were held, and he faced no accountability for their fate because the only people who could have challenged him were either dead, exiled, or too frightened to speak. The Tower made this possible. Without the Tower, the princes would have been held in a public place where their welfare could have been monitored. Without the Tower, their disappearance would have required explanation. The Tower's unique combination of physical isolation and absolute royal control created a space where state murder could be committed invisibly. It was not the first time the Tower served this purpose, and it would not be the last. Whether Richard III ordered their murder remains one of the most debated questions in English history. The traditional account, established by Thomas More and later dramatised by Shakespeare, portrays Richard as a calculating murderer who smothered the boys in their sleep. Revisionist historians have pointed to other suspects, including Henry VII, who had his own reasons for wanting the princes eliminated after he seized the throne in 1485. The truth may never be known, but the image of two children imprisoned in a fortress and quietly murdered has haunted the Tower of London for over 500 years. The Wars of the Roses turned the Tower into a revolving door of imprisonment and execution. Henry VI was held prisoner in the Tower after his deposition in 1461. He was briefly restored to the throne in 1470, then recaptured and returned to the Tower in 1471. On the night of May 21st, 1471, Henry was murdered in the Wakefield Tower. The official account claimed he died of pure displeasure and melancholy, but contemporary sources and the bloodstains found on the floor of the oratory where he was killed left little doubt that he was stabbed to death. Edward IV almost certainly ordered the killing. The Duke of Gloucester, the future Richard III, was present in the Tower that night, and some accounts name him as the man who wielded the blade. George, Duke of Clarence, brother to both Edward IV and Richard III, was imprisoned in the Tower in 1477 after repeatedly conspiring against the king. He was executed on February 18, 1478. The method of his death has become one of the Tower's most enduring legends. According to multiple contemporary sources, Clarence was drowned in a barrel of Malmsey wine. Whether this was his own request, a cruel joke by his brother, or simply an invention by later chroniclers has never been established. But the image of a prince of the blood being drowned in a wine barrel in the bowels of the Tower captures something essential about the fortress. In this place, Death could come in forms that were not just cruel, but grotesque. The Tudor dynasty brought the Tower its bloodiest century. Henry VIII transformed it from an occasional prison into a machine of state terror, and the instrument of that terror was a low wooden scaffold erected on Tower Green, a small patch of grass inside the fortress walls where the most privileged prisoners were executed in relative privacy rather than on the public scaffold at Tower Hill. The distinction mattered. Public execution at Tower Hill meant crowds, noise, and spectacle. Private execution on Tower Green meant a small audience of officials, a quick death, and immediate burial in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, which stands at the edge of the green. Being executed on Tower Green was considered a mark of royal favour. The fact that being killed more quietly was considered a privilege tells you everything you need to know about Tudor England. Henry VIII's reign transformed the Tower from an intermittent prison into the central instrument of his political will. Between 1534 and 1547, more people were imprisoned in the Tower than during any comparable period in its history. The Reformation, the dissolution of the monasteries, and Henry's serial marriages created an atmosphere of permanent political crisis in which anyone could find themselves accused of treason, heresy, or both. The Tower's records from this period reveal the scope of Henry's paranoia. Monks, abbots, bishops, noblemen, courtiers, servants, and even members of the royal family passed through the fortress gates. Some were released after short imprisonments. Others were held for years. Many never left. The Tower became the place where Henry VIII settled his personal grievances, and he had a great many grievances to settle. Anne Boleyn was the first queen to die on Tower Green. Henry VIII's second wife was arrested on May 2nd, 1536, and charged with adultery, incest, and treason. She was imprisoned in the same royal apartments where she had stayed before her coronation 3 years earlier. The same rooms, the same views, the same walls that had once represented the pinnacle of her power now represented the certainty of her death. A French swordsman was brought from Calais specifically for the execution, a concession from Henry that was considered merciful because a sword was faster and more reliable than an axe. On May 19th, 1536, Anne knelt on the scaffold, tucked her hair beneath her cap, and was beheaded with a single stroke. She was 35 years old. Her body was placed in an arrow chest because no coffin had been prepared, and she was buried in the chapel floor, where she remains today. Between Anne's execution and Henry's next marriage, the scaffold on Tower Green claimed several more victims. Thomas Cromwell, the minister who had engineered Anne's downfall, was himself beheaded on Tower Hill on July 28, 1540. After falling from Henry's favour. His execution was botched by an inexperienced executioner who required 3 blows to sever his head. According to one account, Cromwell remained conscious and in agony after the first blow. His fall illustrated the fundamental truth of Tudor politics. The Tower consumed everyone eventually. The architects of other people's destruction became its victims in turn. Less than 3 years later, Henry executed his 5th wife, Catherine Howard, on the same scaffold. Catherine was 17 or 18 years old. She was charged with concealing her romantic history before her marriage to the king. On February 13th, 1542, she was led to Tower Green and beheaded. According to contemporary accounts, she was so frightened that she could barely walk and had to be supported by her attendants as she climbed the scaffold steps. Between Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard, the Tower Green scaffold claims several other victims. Margaret Pole, Countess of Salisbury, was executed on May 27, 1541, at the age of 67. She was the last of the Plantagenet dynasty, and Henry VIII had her killed primarily because her bloodline represented a potential rival claim to the throne. Her execution was horrifically botched. The inexperienced executioner missed her neck with the first blow, striking her shoulder instead. It took multiple blows to complete the execution, and one account claims she ran from the scaffold and had to be chased and hacked down. Elizabeth I herself was a prisoner in the Tower before she became queen. In 1554, her sister Mary had her arrested and confined in the bell tower on suspicion of involvement in Wyatt's rebellion. Elizabeth entered the Tower through the Traitors' Gate, the water gate on the Thames, through which prisoners were traditionally brought. She reportedly sat down on the wet stones and refused to move, declaring, "I am no traitor." She spent 2 months imprisoned in the fortress, during which time she expected daily to be summoned to the scaffold. The experience marked her profoundly. When she became queen 4 years later, she understood more intimately than any other monarch exactly what the Tower represented. She used it accordingly. The most tragic execution on Tower Green was arguably that of Lady Jane Grey on February 12, 1554. Jane had been proclaimed queen for 9 days before Mary Tudor seized the throne. She was 16 or 17 years old. On the morning of her execution, she watched from her window as her husband, Lord Guildford Dudley, was taken to Tower Hill and beheaded. His body was brought back to the Tower in a cart, still bleeding, and passed beneath her window on its way to the chapel. Jane then walked to the scaffold on Tower Green, where she gave a short speech and attempted to blindfold herself. Unable to find the block, she stumbled forward with her hands outstretched, saying, "I pray you dispatch me quickly. Where is it?" A bystander guided her hands to the block. She laid her head down and was beheaded with a single stroke. The executions were not the only horrors the Tower contained. The basement of the White Tower and several of the surrounding towers were used as torture chambers, equipped with instruments designed to extract confessions from prisoners who might otherwise refuse to cooperate with interrogators. The most infamous of these instruments was the rack. The Tower rack consisted of a large rectangular frame with rollers at each end. The prisoners' ankles were fastened to one roller and their wrists to the other. As the rollers were turned in opposite directions, the prisoner's body was stretched until their joints dislocated. The pain was described by survivors as beyond anything that words could convey. Guy Fawkes was racked in the Tower after the gunpowder plot of 1605 until he could barely sign his own confession. The signature on his confession document, which survives in the National Archives, is barely legible, the handwriting of a man whose arms had been pulled from their sockets. Another instrument was the Scavenger's Daughter, invented by Sir Leonard Skevington, Lieutenant of the Tower under Henry VIII. It worked in the opposite direction to the rack, compressing the body rather than stretching it. The prisoner was forced into a kneeling position, and iron hoops were tightened around their body until blood was forced from their nose and ears. It was used primarily on Catholic priests during the Elizabethan era. The Little Ease was a cell in the basement of the White Tower, so small that a prisoner could neither stand upright nor lie down. They were forced to crouch in complete darkness for days or weeks at a time. The psychological effect of prolonged confinement in such a space was devastating. Several prisoners confined in the Little Ease were reported to have lost their sanity entirely. The Tower also housed prisoners accused of witchcraft and sorcery. Anne Askew, a Protestant preacher, was racked in the Tower in 1546 on the orders of the Lord Chancellor. She is the only woman known to have been tortured on the rack in the Tower. The racking was so severe that her joints were dislocated, and she had to be carried to her execution at Smithfield in a chair because she could no longer walk or stand. She was burned at the stake on July 16, 1546, still seated in the chair. The psychological impact of imprisonment in the Tower extended beyond the individual prisoners to their families. When Sir Thomas More was imprisoned, his daughter Margaret visited him repeatedly, attempting to persuade him to sign the oath of supremacy and save his life. He refused. Their final meeting, described by More's biographer, William Roper, saw Margaret break through the guards twice to embrace her father as he was led back to his cell. The scene has been depicted in paintings and plays for centuries. It represents the human cost of the Tower's function as an instrument of political control. The fortress did not just destroy the people it held, it destroyed their families. The inscriptions left by prisoners on the walls of the Tower remain the most direct testimony of what it meant to be held there. Over 100 carved inscriptions survive in the Beauchamp Tower alone, ranging from simple names and dates to elaborate coats of arms, religious symbols, and poignant messages. One inscription reads, "Be friend to one, be enemy to none." Another shows an intricate astronomical clock carved by Hugh Draper, imprisoned in 1561 on suspicion of sorcery. The most haunting is a single word carved in large letters near the floor of a cell in the Salt Tower. It reads, "Jane." No one knows which Jane. No one knows her story. The name is all that remains. Not all prisoners in the Tower were tortured. Many were held in relatively comfortable conditions, particularly those of high rank who might eventually be ransomed or released. The Tower housed prisoners of war, political dissidents, religious objectors, and occasionally foreign dignitaries who had fallen out of favour. Some prisoners were allowed servants, received visitors, and were provided with food and wine at the Crown's expense. Sir Walter Raleigh spent 13 years imprisoned in the Tower between 1603 and 1616, during which time he wrote his History of the World, cultivated a garden on the walls, and conducted chemical experiments in a converted henhouse. But even comfortable imprisonment in the Tower carried a constant psychological weight. Every prisoner knew that their status could change at any moment. A comfortable room could become a death sentence overnight. The lieutenant of the Tower had the authority to move prisoners, restrict their privileges, or deliver them to the scaffold with minimal notice. The uncertainty was itself a form of torture. The religious persecutions of the 16th century turned the Tower into something approaching a factory of suffering. Under Henry VIII, those who refused to acknowledge his supremacy over the Church of England were imprisoned and often executed. Sir Thomas More, the Lord Chancellor who refused to endorse Henry's break with Rome, was held in the Tower for 15 months before his execution on Tower Hill on July 6, 1535. More was permitted books, writing materials, and visits from his family during his imprisonment, but his cell in the bell tower was cold and damp, and his health deteriorated steadily. His last words on the scaffold were reportedly, "I die, the king's good servant, but God's first." Under Elizabeth I, the Tower became the primary holding facility for Catholic priests and missionaries who entered England illegally during the Counter-Reformation. The Jesuit priest John Gerard was imprisoned in the Salt Tower in 1597 and subjected to prolonged torture on the rack. He later escaped from the Tower by climbing down a rope stretched across the moat, one of only a handful of successful escapes in the fortress's history. His account of his imprisonment, published as The Autobiography of a Hunted Priest, remains one of the most detailed descriptions of conditions inside the Tower during the Elizabethan era. The gunpowder plot of 1605 brought the Tower its most famous interrogation. Guy Fawkes was discovered beneath the House of Lords on November 5th with 36 barrels of gunpowder. He was taken immediately to the Tower, where James I personally authorised the use of torture to extract the names of his co-conspirators. The king's written instruction survives. It reads the gentler tortures are to be first used unto him, and so by degrees proceeding to the worst, and so God speed your good work. Fawkes held out for 2 days before the rack broke him. He named every member of the conspiracy. Within weeks, all were either dead or imprisoned. The aftermath of the gunpowder plot reveals something important about the Tower's function in the English state. It was not merely a prison, it was a symbol. The decision to hold Fawkes in the Tower rather than in any other prison was deliberate. The Tower meant something. It meant that the full weight of royal authority was being brought to bear. It meant there would be no mercy, no negotiation, and no escape. For 900 years, being sent to the Tower was the most feared sentence in England, not because the conditions were necessarily worse than other prisons, but because the Tower represented the point of no return. The English Civil War tested the Tower's defences for the first time in centuries. When war broke out in 1642, the Tower was held by parliamentary forces under Sir John Conyers. The fortress's strategic importance was immense. It controlled the eastern approaches to London, housed the royal arsenal and mint, and remained the repository of the crown jewels. Charles I attempted to seize the Tower in January 1642, but was rebuffed. The garrison remained loyal to Parliament throughout the war, and the Tower became a prison for royalist officers and clergy. After the execution of Charles I in 1649, the Commonwealth government considered demolishing the Tower entirely as a symbol of monarchical tyranny. Oliver Cromwell ultimately decided against it, recognising its practical value as an arsenal and mint. But he did order the crown jewels melted down and the gold sold. The jewels that exist today are largely replicas created for Charles II's coronation in 1661, though several individual stones were recovered and reset. The tower's role as a place of execution continued into the 17th century. During the English Civil War, Archbishop William Laud was imprisoned in the tower for 4 years before being beheaded on Tower Hill in 1645. After the Restoration, the regicides who had signed Charles I's death warrant were hunted down, and several were imprisoned in the tower before being hanged, drawn, and quartered at Tyburn. The Jacobite risings of 1715 and 1745 brought the tower its final wave of high-profile political prisoners. After the failed 1715 rebellion, several Scottish lords were imprisoned in the tower, and 2 of them, the Earl of Derwentwater and Viscount Kenmure, were beheaded on Tower Hill in February 1716. Their executions drew enormous crowds and generated considerable public sympathy, particularly for Derwentwater, whose dignified bearing on the scaffold was widely reported. The 1745 rebellion produced an even more dramatic set of Tower prisoners. 3 Scottish lords, Kilmarnock, Balmerino, and Lovat, were all imprisoned after the defeat at Culloden. Kilmarnock and Balmerino were executed on August 18, 1746. Kilmarnock was visibly terrified on the scaffold and required several minutes of prayer before he could lay his head on the block. Balmerino, by contrast, examined the axe, declared it to be satisfactory, and laid his head down without hesitation. He told the executioner to strike when he extended his arms, then did so and died instantly. The last person to be beheaded at the tower was Simon Fraser, Lord Lovat, on April 9, 1747. He was 80 years old and had been convicted of treason for his role in the Jacobite Rising of 1745. A large crowd gathered on Tower Hill to watch the execution. A temporary grandstand built to accommodate spectators collapsed under the weight, killing several people. Lovat reportedly surveyed the chaos, laughed, and quoted Horace in Latin before laying his head on the block. The 18th and 19th centuries saw the tower's military function gradually eclipsed by its growing importance as a tourist attraction and national monument. The Duke of Wellington, as Constable of the Tower from 1826 to 1852, oversaw a major program of restoration and reorganization. He cleared the moat, which had become a stagnant cesspool responsible for repeated outbreaks of cholera among the Tower garrison. He relocated the Royal Menagerie to the London Zoo, and he opened the Tower to a significantly larger number of paying visitors, recognizing that public access generated revenue and reinforced the fortress's symbolic importance to the nation. The Victorian era brought the tower its most extensive physical transformation since Edward I. Anthony Salvin, the architect commissioned to restore the medieval buildings, rebuilt several towers, reconstructed the Waterloo Barracks, and created the neo-Gothic appearance that visitors see today. Much of what appears to be medieval stonework is actually Victorian reconstruction. The tower that tourists photograph is, in many places, a 19th century interpretation of what a medieval fortress should look like, rather than a genuine survival. This is fitting, in a way. The tower has always been as much about perception as reality. Its power derived not from its physical strength, which was frequently questioned by military engineers, but from what it represented in the minds of the English people. The stones themselves are less important than the stories they contain. The tower's use as a prison continued sporadically into the 20th century. During the First World War, 11 German spies were held in the tower and executed by firing squad. During the Second World War, the tower returned to active military use with a vengeance. It served as a prisoner of war camp, a headquarters for military intelligence operations, and once again as a place of execution. The fortress was bombed repeatedly during the Blitz. On the night of September 23, 1940, a German incendiary bomb struck the North Bastion and started a fire that threatened the main guard building. On November 5th, 1940, a high explosive bomb destroyed the mid-19th century guardroom and caused significant damage to several towers. The tower garrison continued to function throughout the bombing, and the crown jewels, which had been moved to a secret location at the start of the war, survived intact. The tower held several high-profile prisoners during the war, including Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy, who was briefly held there after his bizarre solo flight to Scotland in 1941. The last execution at the tower took place on August 15th, 1941, when Joseph Jacobs, a German spy, was shot by a firing squad while seated in a chair because a previous parachute injury prevented him from standing. There is one more chapter in the tower's history that is rarely discussed on the official tours. The Tower Mint operated within the fortress from 1279 until 1812, producing every coin used in England for over 500 years. Isaac Newton served as Warden of the Mint from 1696 and then Master of the Mint from 1699 until his death in 1727. Newton took the role seriously. He personally investigated counterfeiters, gathering evidence in disguise in London's taverns and prisons. He sent 28 men to the gallows for counterfeiting, displaying a ruthlessness that surprised those who knew him primarily as a mathematician and philosopher. The Mint's operations within the tower required enormous quantities of metal, and the fortress contained smelting furnaces that burned continuously for centuries. The pollution was extraordinary. Lead, mercury, and arsenic contaminated the soil around the tower to levels that modern environmental surveys have found are still measurable today. Workers in the Mint suffered from lead poisoning, mercury tremors, and respiratory disease. They were, in effect, being slowly killed by the coins they were producing. The Royal Menagerie, which occupied the Lion Tower at the western entrance, was another aspect of the tower that combined spectacle with cruelty. The menagerie housed exotic animals given as diplomatic gifts, including 3 leopards, presented by the Holy Roman Emperor in 1235, a polar bear given by the King of Norway in 1252, and an elephant from the King of France in 1255. The animals were kept in small enclosures and displayed to the public for an admission fee of 3 halfpence, or free entry if you brought a dog or cat to feed to the lions. The menagerie closed in 1835, when the remaining animals were transferred to the newly established London Zoo in Regent's Park, after a lion mauled a soldier and a monkey bit the Duke of Wellington's aide-de-camp. The tower also served as the headquarters of the Board of Ordnance, which was responsible for supplying weapons and ammunition to the British Army. The fortress contained vast arsenals of gunpowder, muskets, cannons, and other military supplies. On October 30th, 1841, a fire broke out in the Bowyer Tower and spread rapidly to the Grand Storehouse, which contained over 200,000 weapons. The fire burned for 2 days and destroyed several towers, though the White Tower and the Crown Jewels survived. The fire was so intense that the lead roof of the Bowyer Tower melted and poured down the walls like water. The Tower of London is now one of the most visited tourist attractions in the world. Over 3 million people walk through its gates every year. They queue to see the Crown Jewels, which are displayed in the Jewel House, in a vault protected by reinforced concrete walls, electronic sensors, and armed guards. The collection includes the Imperial State Crown, containing 2,868 diamonds, 273 pearls, 17 sapphires, 11 emeralds, and 5 rubies, including the Black Prince's ruby, which is actually a 170-carat spinel that has been in the possession of English monarchs since 1367. The Koh-i-Noor diamond, one of the largest cut diamonds in the world at 105.6 carats, sits in the Queen Mother's crown. It was taken from the Sikh Empire by the British East India Company in 1849, and India, Pakistan, Iran, and Afghanistan have all claimed ownership. The jewels are valued collectively at approximately £4 billion, though several individual pieces are considered priceless and have never been formally appraised. The crown jewels have been stolen from the tower exactly once. In 1671, Colonel Thomas Blood disguised himself as a clergyman and befriended the keeper of the jewels, an elderly man named Talbot Edwards. On May 9th, Blood and 3 accomplices overpowered Edwards, flattened the state crown with a mallet to fit it inside a coat, cut the sovereign's orb in half, and filed down the sceptre to conceal it in a bag. They were caught at the tower gates when Edwards's son arrived unexpectedly and raised the alarm. Blood was brought before Charles II, who was reportedly so amused by the audacity of the theft that he pardoned Blood and granted him a pension. The real motive behind Blood's pardon has never been satisfactorily explained, and some historians believe Charles himself may have been involved in the plot, possibly to raise funds or embarrass the tower's governor. They photographed the ravens, they listened to the yeoman warders, the beefeaters, tell stories about executions and ghosts with practiced theatrical flair. But beneath the tourism, the gift shops and the guided tours, the tower remains what it has always been, a fortress built to control through fear, a place where power was exercised not through laws or democratic institutions, but through stone walls, locked doors, and the constant threat of violence. The ghosts are part of the official tour now. Anne Boleyn has been reported walking the corridors of the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, carrying her head beneath her arm. The ghost of Lady Jane Grey is said to appear on the anniversary of her execution, a white figure on the battlements visible from Tower Green. Guards have reported seeing the princes in the tower, 2 small figures in white nightgowns holding hands in the bloody tower. In 1816, a guard reported seeing a cylindrical apparition of blue light near the Martin Tower, which appeared to engulf his bayonet when he thrust at it. The most persistent haunting is in the Salt Tower, where prisoners carved inscriptions into the walls during the 16th and 17th centuries. The carvings survive today. Names, dates, religious symbols, and in some cases elaborate astronomical designs created by prisoners who had nothing but time and a sharp implement. Visitors to the Salt Tower have reported sudden drops in temperature, the sensation of being watched, and in several cases the feeling of hands on their shoulders when no one else was present. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there is something undeniable about standing in a room where you know that people suffered, where the walls still bear the marks of their presence, where the stone floor was the last surface some of them ever stood upon. The Tower of London does not need ghosts to be haunted. The history is enough. The ravens deserve their own mention. There are always at least 6 ravens kept at the tower, their wings clipped to prevent them from flying away. The tradition is supposedly based on a prophecy attributed to Charles II that if the ravens ever leave the tower, the kingdom will fall. Whether the prophecy is genuine or a later invention is unclear, but the ravens have been maintained as an official garrison since at least the 19th century. They are cared for by the Raven Master, a yeoman warder assigned specifically to their welfare. Each raven has a name, a distinct personality, and a diet of raw meat, biscuits soaked in blood, and the occasional hard-boiled egg. They are, in a sense, the tower's last permanent prisoners, kept behind walls not for any crime, but because tradition demands it. The yeoman warders themselves are another link to the tower's military past. All 37 of them are former senior non-commissioned officers with at least 22 years of military service. They live inside the tower with their families in apartments built into the fortress walls. Their children play in the same courtyards where prisoners were once exercised. Their front doors open onto the same cobblestones that were walked by Anne Boleyn, Guy Fawkes, and Sir Walter Raleigh. To live in the Tower of London is to live inside a crime scene that has been continuously occupied for nearly a millennium. 948 years of history, hundreds of prisoners, dozens of executions, children murdered, queens beheaded, priests burned, princes drowned in wine barrels, men racked until their bones broke, women tortured, until they could no longer stand. Spies shot in chairs, crowns stolen and recovered, lions starving in stone cages, lead poisoning workers in the mint, bombs falling during the Blitz, and through it all, every single night for 700 years, the gates locked at 9:53 p.m., with the same words spoken in the same order by men in the same uniforms. All of it contained within a few acres of stone beside the Thames, in the heart of a city that walks past it every day without stopping to consider what happened behind those walls. The Tower of London is not just Britain's most bloodstained castle. It is a monument to power itself, to what power requires, to what power permits, and to what power does to the people who find themselves on the wrong side of it. The walls are still standing, and they are still watching.